Did you hear from Greg Sankey? Did you hear from the SEC commissioner this week? He was talking not necessarily about basketball. There's been this big fear out there from coast to coast. And that fear is maybe the big boys aren't done moving. Maybe the SECs and the Big Tens of the world, maybe they're not done swallowing up programs. And if they really wanted to, they could just devour the entire sport, which is true. That's the fear of what they could do. But what will they do? That's the only important thing, right? What will they do? So I have sat here and taken a fair amount of criticism because we haven't had Greg Sankey on the show. Yet some of you, there is a small fringe minority out there that have accused me of running interference for this man, for Greg Sankey. And I couldn't care less. I have my preferences just like you do. My preference is for the Oklahomas and Texases of the world not to be in the SEC. I just kind of want everyone to stay in their own little geographical pocket. That's my utopia. I understand that's not reality. So I've got feelings just like you. I also understand there may be a reality that conference commissioners live in where they can't have their perfect worldview enforced via, executive pen stroke. And translation, there are things sometimes you have to do that maybe even you don't want to do. So I don't know where Greg Sankey's heart lies on all this, but I am very interested, as you have been, in where his head is at moving forward and whoever the Big Ten commissioner ends up being and Brett Yormark out there in the Big 12, because that's all we've been talking about lately is conference realignment. I've been using the Dante's Peak volcano metaphors like they're going out of style. And there have been rumblings and rumblings and rumblings. Well, you notice most of that talk centered around the Pac-12, but lately, programs like, Florida State have made a little noise, maybe a little chirping out of Clemson. And what is the automatic assumption there? If Florida State's talking, if Clemson's talking, they're not going to the Pac-12, so the natural conclusion is, could the SEC be lying in the weeds? And then Greg Sankey went on the Paul Feinbaum show, I think Friday, and he did not hold back. And I got to give him a lot of credit. And I am pleasantly surprised, as I think several of you will be, dare I say, relieved at what he said. So 3 things I want to point out here. You don't have to speculate. This is the commissioner of the SEC talking on record. Quote number 1. We were approached by Oklahoma and Texas who said to me, no TV, no money. We want to be a part of that. What you collectively have done in the SEC, I think that's incredible. It's a compliment to everyone in the league. Then, last summer at Media Days, I became the center of expansion. What's he going to do next? I was very intentional to say we're focused on growing to 16. I thought that was important because it's the reiteration of what he said a few times. That was not new, but he was kind of reiterating, it's not like we went out actively searching for OU in Texas. They came to us, and I have told you my personal thoughts on this. My personal thoughts, perfect world, they're still in the Big 12. Real world, they're coming to the SEC, and real world as it relates to Greg Sankey is probably this. They came to him, that part he told you there. The part he didn't tell you, the part that I'm going to fill in the blank of, is I think he knew, as well as every other member institution in the SEC, they weren't just going to tuck tail and run back to the Big 12 if the SEC said, we ain't got room for you. They were going to the Big 10. I think that's where they would have ended up. So forget about your worldview for a second. Forget about mine for a second. Anyone who wants to criticize that guy for adding OU in Texas, I want you to look me in the eye and tell me if you were the commissioner of the SEC and those 2 brands came to you and said, can we come in? You'd say no. And then what if they said, can we come in for real? And you said no again. And it's not a Jehovah's Witness, guys. It's 2 big brands in the Midwest that want to come in, and they really, really expand the scope and breadth of the value of your TV deal. But even if you don't care about that, what if there was a third knock? For the last time, can we come in? And before you say no, you should be aware, if you do, we're going to the Big 10 instead. Then what would you do? Would you tell them no still? If you did, you'd be out of a job before too much longer. So anyway, that's why I've never, even though I personally don't like the move, I've never really blamed Greg Sankey a whole lot for it. Okay, now let's get into some fairly new revelations. The second quote he gave, again, this is all from the Paul Feinbaum show later this week. I'm shocked this didn't get more run than it did. Greg Sankey continues. And now he's talking about how they expand. We've done it geographically. We've done it well from media positioning. And I'm not a recruiter, and I respect my colleagues. He just said a whole lot. That is one sentence, I guess. He said a whole lot. The first goes right back to what we've heard recently, and that is Florida State's unhappy with their deal with the ACC. Clemson, you can just assume, is unhappy with their deal and their revenue share and cut from the ACC. And if there is trouble there, and if they find a way out, the natural assumption has just been it'll be the SEC. That's where they'll head. Well, that can be a fear of yours, but Greg Sankey just told you a lot when he said, let me read the quote again, "I'm not a recruiter. I respect my colleagues." Yeah, he talked about geography, and yeah, Florida State and Clemson would fit there. And if I were to intentionally out of context late kick you, and I stopped the sentence there, it would sound like he's ready, willing, and able to poach him. But when he said, "I'm not a recruiter and I respect my colleagues," here's what I take that to mean. They're sitting still for a while. And they probably know if they really wanted to go to the mat, there are some other brands, not just FSU Clemson. I'm talking about some other brands that would make sense geographically that they're not going after because they don't need to. There's one matter to be able to do something. There's the other matter of it being prudent and you needing to. Here is the money paragraph. Quote number 3 from Greg Sankey on the Paul Feinbaum Show, Thursday or Friday. I really should have nailed the date down. He continued, "I understand that people have different motivations and different interests, but we need a time of settling and a time of collaboration, and we need a time beyond just collaboration and cooperation because we have some really important challenges ahead of us that require us to work together. Hey, I'm not simply sitting in my glass house throwing stones. We've added members too, but I think we all have to be careful in how we proceed and thoughtful in how we communicate." That is him giving you his vision of the future. That is not a man who sounds like he is on the precipice of poaching more schools just for the sake of poaching more schools. It doesn't sound like a man who's desperate. This is diametrically opposed to the stance that maybe you would have if you were the Big 12 commissioner. Certainly, it's another galaxy from the stance you would have if you were the Pac-12 commissioner. He's dealing from a position of leverage. And when you're enjoying a position of leverage, you get to undo the top couple of buttons on your shirt. You get to lean back. You get to spread your arms out. You get to pop one foot up over the knee, and you get to wait if you want to. You don't have to do anything. You can just be grandpa at the family reunion and chill over there and wait for someone to come to you. And even then, if you don't want to talk to him, you can say, "Go on, this ain't no soup kitchen." At least that's the way it works in my family reunions. And so Greg Sankey's trying to tell you, hey, forget about expansion for a while. We got some really, really big matters to attend to. You know, this whole NIL thing, this whole seeking federal help thing legislatively, that stuff is going to take cooperation. And I think the trepidation in his voice is not so much can we go poach some more programs, are these people going to be able to work together for a common good when we've basically had knives out behind each other's backs? At least that's the way it seemed on the surface, and it doesn't seem too dissimilar to that behind the scenes. Are we going to be able to work together to actually accomplish anything? Because I don't know if you guys can tell, but I'm still just wearing the same white t-shirt I always have. So as of this evening, they have not elected me commissioner, and they have not even called me to talk about being college football commissioner, ignorantly enough. And so in light of that, it seems they're going to try and work together to fix college athletics. I wish them luck. I really do. What I will say is if you woke up last Sunday morning, a week ago, and you were concerned that the SEC was about to go poach more programs, and the SEC was going to be the reason why another conference sank, I think you can rest easy for a little while. It doesn't sound like the SEC is intent on moving anytime soon, and it's not because they can't. It just sounds like they don't really feel like they need to. That's one domino. There are more dominoes out there. Next thing we need to figure out is who's going to be the commissioner in the Big Ten. And after that, we need to figure out whether that new commissioner and the member institutions and the powers that be in the Big Ten are interested in an Oregon or a Washington, and whether those universities are ready to, as soon as the door opens. We need to figure out whether that solidarity, that arm-in-arm approach that it feels like those four corner schools have when it comes to the Big 12 trying to poach them, is it really as strong as it seems? I tend to think not. Uncle Dennis had the Utah athletic director call him out the other day on Twitter, And hey, I'd be over here oohing and eyeing if I hadn't heard conference commissioners and athletic directors say one thing the literal night before the next thing happened. So that really meant nothing to me. Some of you wanted me to talk about that. You know what I may do? Because I called him the other day and asked him if he'd be up for it. I may just have Uncle Dennis on the show one night very soon. Because why listen to me talk about him and his reporting when we could just have him on? All right, moving on. So there you go. No expansion this week from the SEC. Good news, I think, mostly all around. Guys, thanks for watching Late Kick. Make sure and leave a comment. I love interacting with you. But most of all, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. That's how we keep all of this free.